Shabbat Shalom. Before I begin the formal sermon, I just want to clarify something in case you've always wondered, why is it at Temple Israel we leave the Aron closed during the processional, the return of the Torah, until we turn that corner and head back up? Well, it's because otherwise we would be stuck. If the doors were open, then as we take the Torah out, somebody's back is going to be turned to a Torah. And you're supposed to be watching the Torah going around, and that would mean you have to pick. Do I look at the Torahs in the Aron? Do I look at the Torah traveling? Either way, I'm insulting one of the Torahs in the room. Therefore, we remove that confusion for everybody by keeping the doors closed until the Torah begins its return, where you'll be pointing at it, and therefore not having your back to the Torahs in the Ark either. It is an elegant solution to a classic Jewish problem. But it is not the topic of today's sermon, but I just wanted to use the opportunity to talk a little bit about that showing of kavod, of giving honor to the Torah that we try to do each and every time the Torah comes out. Instead, I want to talk about a very important anniversary that is upon us. An 80th anniversary, in fact. Anybody know the magical 80th anniversary that is happening right now in May? VE Day. VE Day. Now, in the United States, you'd be forgiven for going VE. What are we talking about? Well, VE is the Victory in Europe Day. This is the 80th anniversary of the victory over Nazi Germany in the European theater. As Americans, of course, we were still very much involved in a war all the way up until August, the war in the Pacific. But the European theater came to its conclusion in this month of May, 80 years ago. Now, as Americans, you're forgiven for not knowing VE Day. As Jews, shame on you if you don't know VE Day. Because as important as it was to complete the war with the defeat of the Japanese tyranny, as Jews, obviously, the defeat of Nazi Germany was the most monumental element for us as a nation during World War II, because up until its final hours, they were still busy exterminating our people. And so we have to make sure that we remember the victory that happened and the miraculous nature that within only a few short years, the mighty Nazi regime was able to be toppled with many miracles along the way. As much as we are pained that they did what they did, we recognize it would have been much worse without the assistance of so many. But that then brings me to my actual question of the day. The anniversary was just a teaser. Why did we bother? I don't mean the usual nihilistic worry of, oh, why bother? The world is always bad. It's always going to be bad. Who cares what you do? No. I mean the more spiritual question of why bother. After all, we know that with effort and toil, we might live but 120 years, but our souls are eternal. The nefesh within each one of us, our neshama, is part of the great outpouring of God's creation, which does not diminish and does not decay. So, whether you are going to live to be 120 or whether you pass away at 1 year old, your soul is eternal. So why worry about all of this? This is a blink of an eye. This is nothing. This is but the anteroom to the world to come, olam haba. Why should we struggle in this world when the next world, by proportion, is going to dominate all of our existence? So, one idea is that we are preparing for the Messiah's coming. But God has told us the Messiah will come one way or another, right? It's not as though we can permanently delay the coming of the Messiah. So, again, why bother, right? Live as you can live, die as you must. Why struggle in the process? It's if you were in the middle of the ocean and you are cast off of the boat, which disappears into the horizon, and you have no life preserver, no life raft, and you know that you are 1,000 miles from land, why are you treading water? Just allow the deep to swallow you and go into Olam Haba? Why struggle at all?
God wants us just alone to struggle, but he would have given us the laws.
Ah.
Something to do while we are here.
Something to do while we're here. Now I'm going to dress that up a little bit, but in essence, you are absolutely right. We just read from the Torah, and the Torah is full of mitzvot that apply to this world. That it is not just about preparing this world for Mashiach, it is about preparing ourselves individually for this world and the next. That the mitzvot are the reason for our existence. If God had merely wanted to create us as he created malachim, angels, God could have created us as angels and skipped this whole world element in the meantime. But that wasn't God's plan. God wanted human beings to live, to struggle, to use Torah to guide themselves in this world in order to improve this world for themselves and its ultimate redemption, but also to shape the soul. You see, the soul outside of this world is static. That's the trouble and the blessing for angels, is they are unchanging. But we have been given a angelic-ish essence, a soul that is akin to the spiritual essence of the angels, but put into this world where it can be transformed. Now, we want to make sure we transform it the right way, and so God gave us Torah so that we would know how to live so that our soul would be transformed by its choices and experiences in this world into something even more splendid than it would have been had God bypassed this entire point. Because it is only through this world that we can exercise our moral judgments, can exercise our spiritual efforts to walk in a path, and thus reach the afterlife. Now, all this afterlife talk may sound a little unfamiliar to some of you, because according to recent survey research, only about 40% of Jews even believe in the afterlife. That is about half as many percentage-wise as non-Jews. We tend to be, it seems, demographically, not so interested in the afterlife. But that's missing an essential element. And I'm pretty sure that in this group we have a higher than 40% average because you all chose to come to services on Shabbat. But even still, the afterlife figures prominently in our understanding of everything else that we do. So, whether you believe in an afterlife or not, bear with me, and let's try and talk about what that means. So if we are shaping our souls through our choices in this world, then what happens after we leave this world, when we cash out our chips, when we are making our final exit? What happens next? Maybe 40% is a high number. Or maybe we're so vague about what happens next. Well, I'm going to give you the basic idea of what happens next. I will put a large caveat, however, that there is much discussion about the details, even if the broad outline is agreed upon by Jewish resources going back for thousands of years. So the short answer of what happens next is judgment. Judgment. All right? Are you good or are you bad? Now that sounds very plain and simple. Okay, some people are good, some people are bad, and you're probably already beginning to click into a Christological view of what happens next. Please hold off on that. Pop culture has done a great job of infecting all of us with other theologies than our own. Please hold on till we get to our own. Judgment does not mean God simply stacks up all of your good deeds on one side and stacks up all of your bad deeds on the other side and then watches to see which way the balance goes. No. Judgment means each and every aspect, moment, instant of your life is reviewed in its own. And then it is reflected as being good, maybe neutral, when you're asleep perhaps, and then not so good, and varying degrees. So, you steal a pen from work, okay, that goes on the side of demerit, absolutely, and it's going to be smaller than if you stole a bus, which would be a much larger side of demerit. Now, what are all these demerits and the opposite rewards actually adding up to? Well, this is again where the details get hotly debated within our tradition, but there seems to be at least a generic consensus that the soul will go through a period of reflection. That the soul right now, within each one of us, governing our lives, is sharing the wheel with our other impulses and desires and our habits and our lazinesses and all of the other aspects that go into our life. And right now, sometimes the soul wants to go to the right and the rest of yourself wants to go to the left, and very often you go to the left. That's what happens. It's okay. We're all human. However, when we go to the left, we don't say, nah, now I get to be bad. Now I get to be evil. We come up with explanations for why we are doing what we are doing. Even Hitler himself had explanations for why he was doing what he was doing that to him, and unfortunately millions of others, made perfect sense. And indeed, there are some people still today that think those explanations make sense. But when we move from this world to Olam Haba, well, there's no longer the ability to create fictions like that to justify our wrongdoing. When we stand in the light of God, where only truth can exist, then the soul says, I knew it. I knew it was wrong the whole time. I can't believe I allowed myself to be convinced by the rest of myself to do what I did. And depending upon the magnitude of the deed that was done, there will be gut-wrenching regret, the kind of which will cut to the core of an essence of ourself. That we allowed ourselves to be conned, we allowed ourselves to be cajoled, we allowed ourselves to become afraid, and we allowed ourselves to perform those deeds. Depending upon the magnitude, so will be the significance of our regret. Just as if you suddenly realize stealing that pen from the office is wrong, you're probably not going to feel as bad as somebody who realizes stealing the bus was wrong. Different levels, depending upon what was done. Everybody following so far? And likewise, the opposite. People tend to dress up the rewards of Olam Haba as though it was going to be filled with palaces made of gold with all the finest foods you could ever want. Those are the desires of the body. And those aren't the desires of the soul. It's just sometimes the soul has to speak to the body in its own language to convince it and to go along with what's right. But in truth, there will be no palaces, there will be no fine edibles. There will simply be an existence that knows that what was done was right, which is one of the most beautiful sensations we can have. Because right now, as we follow the mitzvot, we hope that what we're doing is right. And sometimes we will feel that flash of satisfaction that indeed I did the right thing at this moment. But oftentimes we are confused. Sometimes, like with where the Torah is in the room and the ark is open, we're not sure which way to look. We're not sure which mitzvah to pursue most passionately. And we can be unsure that we are actually walking on the path. As I say very often, life doesn't come with an answer key. And so sometimes we're not sure. Imagine the satisfaction that comes in Olam Haba when your soul is able to reflect in the light of God's truth that, yeah, that choice you made, that extra kindness you gave to that person, here's what happened. Here's what it did to that person. Here is how it changed their life for good. You didn't even know the consequences of what maybe felt like a small deed at the time, but in fact it was transformative for them, for their family, for their community, and on for generations. Imagine the feeling that our soul will have of fulfillment, of understanding, of joy, and of peace for recognizing the benefit of the deeds that we have performed in this world that were done in accordance with Torah. Well, if you can imagine each of those, then you can understand what happens when we move from this world to the next. We get, if you will, the ultimate report card, and we will care. You may not have cared about your grade in math when you were in high school. You'll care about this because your soul will finally be unfettered and be allowed to truly scream for joy or scream in frustration for the opportunities that have been squandered, wasted, or spent on things that only made things worse for yourself and for others. But there is still one aspect of the afterlife that, even in this broad category, probably some part of you is still asking the question. All right, Rabbi, so some people do more good and less bad, some people do more bad and less good. Where do the thoroughly wicked fall in this system? What is the result for them? Is Hitler continually, infinitely suffering as his soul looks back on the millions of lives that he took, not only of Jews, but of all of the millions, tens of millions that suffered throughout the European war, as well as the aid that he gave to the war in the Pacific that caused millions of more lives there to be lost? Is his soul permanently in torment? Is he in hell? Is the question that we scratch our heads over. Well, the short answer is that apart from hyperbole that we sometimes use, we recognize that there is no such thing as an infinite crime. There is no infinite crime. We are mortal. We are not God. We cannot create things of infinite power and of durability. And therefore, no, there is no infinite punishment. Our tradition doesn't rest there. However, it does say, okay, there may not be infinite punishment. Does that mean that that soul can actually be redeemed? Well, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tohorahi, the soul you put within me, God, is pure. I may clutter it, I may mess it up, I may put all sorts of muck around myself and behave in the most reprehensible ways, but the essence is there. And once all of the terribleness has been scrubbed away, all of the regret has been given for whatever monumental tragedies have been perpetrated, whatever is left, however small, however insignificant, well, that will be subsumed back into Olam Haba, into the presence of God, only once everything else has been removed of its wickedness. Now, as a human in a body, that doesn't always give us satisfaction, because we like vengeance. We like revenge. We like to cause suffering, because we think someone else deserves it. But thankfully, for our sake, God doesn't work the same way. If so, which one of us could say that we have committed only the correct amount of transgressions, that we have not been bad enough to warrant eternal torment, but good enough to get into Olam Haba? But now that I'm in, I don't want those other people that are much, much worse than me. Well, there are people better than each of us who might be looking at us and saying they don't want to share the afterlife with us. And if we follow that no true Scotsman fallacy to its logical conclusion, then the afterlife would be full of only God, because none of us are actually fit to be in God's presence by our own merits. We say this every single high holidays when we say Avinu Malkeinu. It is not because of our deeds that we appeal to you. It is because of your mercy, God. None of us have earned what God has promised to us and what God has already granted us. And therefore, none of us are fit to say others don't deserve it. But there will be a reckoning. And this is something that is important to hold on to, because as much as we believe that we must, because the Torah commands it, fight for justice in this world, fight for peace, fight against the villains of World War II and fight against the villains of our own day, as much as that struggle is an essential element of the reason for our existence, we also recognize it is not the entirety of our existence. That eventually we will move into Olam Haba. Eventually we will understand. In the light of God's truth, we will understand ourselves, we will understand our deeds, we will understand each other. And may we also have the mercy and compassion that comes with God's light. Ultimately, God has decided to err on the side of mercy. Strict justice is not how God governs this world. Instead, it is the rule of compassion. Find mercy for yourself. Find mercy for each other. We will find mercy from God, and one day we will all understand. And in the meantime, the struggle goes on. Shabbat Shalom.